Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan John.
And I'm Diksha Bisla, and coming up on the show today, as fuel prices surge in the United States as well, President Donald Trump says that US will be leaving very soon, ending the Iran war in 2 to 3 weeks. Well, he also said that a deal is not necessary to end this war that has disrupted energy supplies and shaken the global economy. We're going to get you all the details on the show today. Stay tuned.
And as we hear more and more hints from the US that they want to get out of here, the Iranians still maintain that no negotiations are going on with Washington. While in the latest, State Secretary, US, Marco Rubio, said that the end to the Iran war is near, saying maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but an end to the war is coming. And the NATO alliance will also need to be re-evaluated, will need to be re-examined once the war is over, as the cracks in global alliances for the US only continue to increase. Let's start with the headlines. This is World DNA.
White House says US President Donald Trump will give an address to the nation tonight to provide an important update on Iran. Announcement comes as Trump says US forces would end operations in Iran very soon.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says United States will need to re-examine its relationship with NATO once the war against Iran concludes, adding in a Fox News interview that final decision lies with Donald Trump.
Netanyahu says Israel will continue its military campaign against Iran, vowing to crush Iran's regime. Remarks follow President Pezeshkian saying that Iran has the will to end the conflict but seeks guarantees that hostilities will not fail.
US State Department confirms an American journalist kidnapped in Baghdad by a suspected Iran-backed armed group. Iraqi security forces arrest one suspect and are searching for others. Efforts continue to secure journalists' release.
Lebanon's health ministry says 7 people killed in Israeli airstrikes in and around Beirut. While one strike in Jiran area leaves 5 people dead, while another attack in Khalde kills 2 people.
A Russian military transport plane crashes over Crimea, killing all 29 people on board, including 6 crew members. Authorities say there were no signs of external impact and a technical failure is the likely cause.
A US judge orders a halt to construction of President Trump's massive White House ballroom, saying congressional approval would be needed for the project. Trump calls the ruling wrong. His administration files an appeal.
Emmanuel Macron aims for France to ban social media for under 15s, following similar moves in Australia and Indonesia. But the parliament disagrees on the ban, requiring a compromise, and enforcement of law remains uncertain.
Asian markets surged on Wednesday after Trump signaled a possible end to the Iran conflict, lifting investor sentiment. Now, South Korea's Kospi jumped nearly 5%, while Japan's Nikkei 225 gained over 3%, tracking strong overnight rallies on Wall Street.
The war in Iran could end in 2 to 3 weeks. At least that is what the American president is claiming.
Well, Donald Trump says that US forces would end operations in Iran very soon as fuel prices surged to $4 a gallon in the US for the first time since 2022. Now, the US president was asked about high fuel prices, but Trump dismissed any concerns. He said that prices will tumble down once he leaves Iran, adding that it will be happening very soon. Listen to this.
I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3. We're hitting them very hard. Last night we knocked out tremendous amounts of missile-making facilities. As you probably read or wrote, we knocked out. Excuse me.
Pardon me for interrupting. The U.S. will be gone or done with the war in 2 or 3
I think
weeks?
2 or 3 weeks.
Not 3 weeks. If it is
We'll
3
leave.
weeks.
Trump said that the end to the US operations is not dependent on reaching any deal with Iran. And Trump reiterated that his earlier remarks that the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz should be other countries' problems, saying Washington will have nothing to do with the crucial waterway.
I think that the people understand it. We'll be leaving very soon, and if France or some other country wants to get oil or gas, they'll go up through the Strait and the Hormuz Strait. They'll go right up there and they'll be able to fend for themselves. I think it'll be very safe, actually, but we have nothing to do with that.
Now, President Trump also made light of the Iranian threat against leading US tech firms in West Asia. He wondered what will Iran use for any attacks, asking whether it would be a BB gun.
Well, the White House has announced that Trump would address the nation to provide an important update on Iran. The address is scheduled at 9 p.m. local time on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the U.S. Central Command continued its military operations targeting Iran. Thousands of American troops have already been sent to the region, while a third aircraft carrier, USS George H.W. Bush, and its accompanying warships are also heading to the region.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio also said that Washington could see the finish line in the Iran war. Talking to Fox News, Rubio said that there is potential for direct meeting with Iran, but said that Trump won't allow negotiations to be used as a delay tactic here.
Well, earlier, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Al Jazeera that he had received messages from US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff directly, but stressed that it did not amount to a negotiation.
Now, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has said that Tehran has the necessary will to end the war, provided its enemies guaranteed it would not flare up again. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel would press ahead with its military campaign against Tehran.
We will continue to crush the terror regime, fortify the security belts around us, and achieve our goals.
Well, Netanyahu also claimed that Israel is forging new alliances with important countries in the region to counter the Iranian threat, but he did not specify which these countries were that are getting involved with Israel. All right, there's more on this, and for that we're now being joined live by Nader Hashemi from Washington, D.C. He's an associate professor of Middle East and Islamic politics at Georgetown University. Professor Hashemi, pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast. Let's quickly, there's lots to unpack. 2 to 3 weeks is now the new timeline, as we are currently in week 5, which was initially supposed to be the end of the timeline. Now 2 to 3 weeks more. But we have ground troops already deployed, more troops joining in from the US side. George H.W. Bush, the third aircraft carrier, and the entire warship group being deployed to the region. The Houthis already involved. Attacks and threats of attacks on civilian infrastructure only increasing. And the Israelis saying that they've only achieved half of their targets. Does this 2 to 3 week timeline seem plausible, since Israel does not seem to be abiding to it at all at this point?
Well, Israel will abide by whatever the United States decides. So Netanyahu would obviously, if it was up to himself, would like to keep bombing Iran for another 10 years. But if Donald Trump decides to end the war, Israel would have to follow suit. The interesting, point here is, does the 2 to 3 week timeline that the president has announced, is that something that we can guarantee will be the end of this war. This is not the first time that Donald Trump has sort of suggested an end to the war, only to shift the deadline, which just highlights the complete incoherency of U.S. Middle East policy at this moment. It's clear that Donald Trump has completely underestimated the adversary that he's chosen to start a war with. He thought Iran was Venezuela, and they would quickly capitulate. Iran still seems to have a lot of fight left in it. So I wouldn't be surprised if 2 to 3 weeks from now, we are having a similar conversation where Donald Trump is saying the exact same thing 2 to 3 more weeks before this war ends.
Right, Dr. Reshamian, speaking of underestimations and miscalculations, the US has said that it has achieved its primary objectives of degrading the nuclear capability of Iran and also achieved the regime change. And he said that this new regime is less radicalized than its predecessors. But from what we've seen, if anything, Iran has made it clear that even though its military capabilities are considerably weakened, it's not going to back down. In fact, if it's anything to go by, we've seen them retaliate with a more hardline resolve here. Now, in light of these latest statements, how do we view what Trump is claiming here? And also, do you see this as perhaps a last-ditch effort to exit the war without losing face for Donald Trump here?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. He's trying to exit the war by claiming some massive victory. But the more he speaks, the more Donald Trump reveals his complete misunderstanding of what's going on in the region and how his policy is now totally confused and bewildering to anyone trying to understand it. So just take the question of nuclear weapons. Donald Trump says, we're going to stay in this war to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Well, last year when he bombed Iran, he said the United States had totally and completely obliterated Iran's potential for making nuclear weapons. Now he's saying we still have to accomplish that task. So that doesn't make any sense. He's claiming that, the United States has achieved regime change. He doesn't understand what regime change actually means. It doesn't mean individuals who've been killed and new people come into their place. It means an entire political system that is in place, and that system has changed. And that clearly hasn't happened in Iran. When leaders of Iran are killed or assassinated by the Israelis or Americans, new people take their place, and the regime very much remains in control. And if anything, it's not a more moderate regime. Every Iran analyst realizes that the people coming to power in Iran are ultra hardliners, people who are less willing to make a deal with the United States. So everything Donald Trump says is just demonstrably false. And this just serves to highlight the incoherency of American foreign policy toward the Persian Gulf at this moment.
Professor, when it comes to the new regime in Iran, the new leader is the son of the slain leader, whose family, a major part of it was eliminated, was killed in the first day of this war. If anything, a normal human understanding would estimate that there's going to be more vengeance from this regime. But we'll leave that to an analysis later and to see how Iran really acts out their part of the deal, because they've lost any faith in the US to have any kind of diplomatic discussions going forward. But let me quickly come to the Strait of Hormuz, where Trump now says we have nothing to do with it. He's asked his own allies, go fetch your own oil, go fight them and then take the oil. The strait would have not been blocked had this war not started unilaterally by the US. There was no consultation with Western partners or even with his own Congress when this war was started. And now the Strait of Hormuz remains locked. My question is, even if the US decides to retreat today, not even 2 or 3 weeks later, they decide to retreat today, how quickly will oil prices start to come down?
Well, I suspect they would start to come down because it would signal that the war is over. But what would change is that Iran would now be, in the scenario you just outlined, in full control of the Straits of Hormuz, allowing friendly shipping to pass through, but adversary shipping, anyone allied with the United States or the Gulf states that have been clandestinely and covertly helping the United States in this war, they would be charged a hefty fee to pass through the Straits of Hormuz. So this just highlights the complete failure of Donald Trump's foreign policy, because he was all about trying to sort of keep the Strait of Hormuz open, making sure that Iran doesn't have that leverage over the global community. Now he's announcing today that he's abandoning the entire project. So implicitly, he's sort of announcing the failure of American foreign policy, that the U.S. is pulling out, and if anyone wants to, go in there and deal with this problem, they're on their own. The United States is not going to be there to help them. So effectively, what's going to happen is now Iran will be in full control of the Strait of Hormuz. Before they weren't. It was an open shipping lane, and people were coming and going, and Iran wasn't interfering. Now Iran's leverage over this strait of water, this body of water, and as a result over the global economy has increased massively as a result of Donald Trump's failure here. So this is a huge defeat for the United States. It's pretty clear that Donald Trump doesn't understand this, but I think the rest of the world watching this drama unfold clearly sees that it is a defeat for the United States and a victory for Iran.
Right, and Professor, of course, this war has been, in more ways than one, a war of unintended consequences. And the Strait of Hormuz is just one example. Now, with Donald Trump's approval ratings at an all-time low and his apparent frustration with its allies telling them to fetch your own oil or buy from the United States, as Shivan was just mentioning. Now, given all of this, I just want to understand, what does it mean for the transatlantic alliance going forward from here? Because we understand that this is not spelling, very well for Donald Trump at this point, either domestically or on the geopolitical stage.
Well, clearly, Donald Trump's, social media post this morning lashing out at NATO countries demonstrates that he is very upset with them. And now the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is saying the United States is going to reconsider its relationship with NATO. Donald Trump was always leaning in that direction. But of course, if he tears up the NATO alliance, that's a huge victory for Vladimir Putin and a huge victory for China. This is their dream come true. So I suspect at some point before the United States moves in that direction to pull out of NATO, this reality is going to dawn upon him, and he would suffer a lot of pushback and criticism in the United States for destroying one of the most powerful military alliances ever constructed and handing a victory to Vladimir Putin. So I don't think he'll go that far. I think this is just a president who's acting like a spoiled brat. When he can't get his way, he lashes out and he throws a temper tantrum. Eventually he'll calm down, and I suspect the NATO alliance will remain intact.
But Professor, when you look at the statements that came out from the Western countries, and these are unprecedented statements coming out. Spain had made it clear from the beginning, we will not allow our bases to be used by US jets. Then comes Italy saying we will not allow your jets to land in our bases. France says you will not even allow you to use our airspace. UK says we will not get sucked into this war with the US. These are statements coming out by their core partnership in the West. The fractures that have already been caused by this war, do you feel even if the NATO alliance remains intact on paper, does it really have that kind of impact or psychological impact in terms of war? Article 5, you attack one nation, they all come for you. Has that image completely been destroyed after what we're seeing?
Well, I wouldn't say completely destroyed. NATO was, let's remember, was put together to really protect Europe. And they're united on the question of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. When it comes to the Middle East, that's really not NATO's area of interest. But of course, the facts that you just mentioned, the criticisms, the refusal of these very close allies of the United States to back his war in the Middle East does not bode well for the NATO alliance, because it suggests there's deep divisions among these members. But let's remember, they're not fighting over Europe. They're fighting over this disastrous war that everyone realizes was completely unnecessary, is illegal under international law, and it was poorly executed, and now, is clearly unraveling before our eyes. And so I think all of those countries in Europe that you just mentioned are trying to protect their own interests, their own image, and distance themselves from the disaster in the Persian Gulf that's unfolding before us.
And Professor, if we can just extend that a little bit more, in your appreciation, does America have any friendly allied nation left with it other than Israel at this point?
Well, Of course, it has those allies that are part of this, right-wing populist international that are sort of just devotees of Donald Trump. So Viktor Orban in Hungary, Argentina, you mentioned Israel, arguably Prime Minister Modi in India. Countries like that, I think, lean in Donald Trump's direction. They're considered part of an alliance. But you're right. I think it's very noteworthy and correct of you to highlight deep fractures and divisions within the Western alliance. It doesn't bode well for the future of NATO. And of course, no one is more happier at this moment than Vladimir Putin. He would love to see the NATO alliance continue to splinter along these lines because it makes his policies in Ukraine much more easier to prosecute.
Right, Professor, and we've been hearing for weeks now when Donald Trump is claiming that Iran is begging for a deal, which Iran has continued to flatly reject. And it was essentially between the 15 points that were presented by Washington and the 5 demands which Iran laid out. But now we're hearing something completely different. And Donald Trump has said that they can essentially pull out of Iran without a deal being there. Now, it only adds to the mistrust that both the nations have, with each other. How do you think that is going to pan out from Iran, given the current statements that are coming out?
Yeah, so I think Iran realizes that the longer this war drags on, the more that they are in the driver's seat. And Donald Trump is vulnerable here, both domestically in the United States and also because of the effects of the global economy that this war has unleashed. From Iran's perspective, they want to get out from under the sanctions that has devastated their economy and have created instability and a popular revolt. They want, I think, to drag this war out for as long as possible where they can get a grand bargain from the United States. I don't know if Donald Trump is prepared to do that. If the United States unilaterally just declares victory and pulls out, Iran can claim, well, that it has won this war because the regime wasn't toppled, it's remained in place. And then it will start to, I predict, use its control of the Straits of Hormuz to charge a tax for international shipping to go through that strait to compensate it for the war. The other point to remember is that Donald Trump can declare an end to the war, but when you start a war, the other side also has a vote. So Iran can still hit American targets, American allies, still hit Israel. And the war will continue, and then that'll force Donald Trump's hand. Either does he go back into the Middle East and try to bomb Iran further? That's one likely scenario, and I suspect it's one that we can possibly see because Iran does not want to be in a position that it was in last summer after the 12-day June war, where it agreed to a ceasefire, and then 6 months later it got attacked again. It wants to prevent that from happening, and so I think it's going to try and use the leverage it has over the Straits of Hormuz to try and get a better deal.
Professor Hashemi, thank you so much for making time for us, and hopefully 2 to 3 weeks down the line, we will see an end to this war. We can only hope this is the final timeline. Professor Hashemi joining us from Washington.
Thank you.
All right, and moving on, the crown jewel of the U.S. Navy is in the talks in Croatia after being forced to leave the war zone in West Asia.
Well, a 100,000-ton steel giant, once meant to protect absolute power, is now making a silent exit under a cloud of controversy. We look at the claims and counterclaims behind the USS Gerald R. Ford's sudden withdrawal from the battlefield.
The most advanced war machine ever built, a nuclear-powered fortress capable of launching waves of stealth fighters into the heart of any conflict. The USS Gerald R. Ford was the ultimate deterrent, a massive shadow looming over West Asia. But now, that shadow is gone. And the questions being asked in its wake are shaking the foundations of American naval supremacy. the world's most expensive aircraft carrier is officially out of the fight in the region. Pentagon confirmed that the Ford has been pulled from the front lines for urgent maintenance in Greece, but the timing of it has sparked speculation. Iran says the unthinkable has happened, that the mighty USS Gerald R. Ford was forced to retreat, not by direct confrontation, but by the looming threat of Houthi missiles. According to Iran's Revolutionary Guard commanders, Yemen's Houthis pushed the carrier strike group back. They describe it as a humiliating retreat. However, Washington tells a different story. There is no official confirmation of any forced withdrawal. Yet, questions have surfaced, because separate reports suggest that the USS Gerald R. Ford may not be fully combat ready for months. Estimates point towards a 12 to 14-month window before peak operational capability. A massive fire on board the aircraft carrier raged for 30 hours, leaving many sailors injured. With the USS Gerald Ford gone, US is left with only the USS Abraham Lincoln to lead the battle against Iran. Iranian forces have claimed the attack on Abraham Lincoln, but the US military asserts that the supercarrier remains operational. In essence, the US has only one aircraft carrier in the region, signaling strategic vulnerability. With the way the war is escalating, this gap truly matters. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And with that, it's time for us to slip into a very short break on World again.
There's more on the other side coming up. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is just over 70 days away. Amidst this, FIFA President Gianni Infantino has said that Iran will participate as scheduled. We'll bring you this and more details coming in, along with breaking news. Come right back. This is World again.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One. In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION World is One.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power. Only on WION. World is One.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Vielleicht nur als Impostant.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with Deeksha. I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss. Let's start with the headlines.
Kuwait Civil Aviation Authority says Iran drone strike Kuwait International Airport, targeting fuel storage tanks and causing a large fire on site. No casualties have been reported.
British Maritime Security Agency says a tanker hit by projectile which is off the coast of Qatar's capital Doha, causing damage to its hull, and the crew is safe. No casualties or environmental impact reported.
White House says US President Trump will give an address to the nation tonight to provide an important update on Iran. Announcement comes as Trump says US forces would end operations in Iran very soon.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says United States will need to re-examine its relationship with NATO once the war against Iran concludes, adding in the interview that the final decision lies with President Trump.
Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is forming new alliances with key regional countries to counter what he describes as the Iranian threat. Does not specify which countries are involved or provide any further details.
US judge orders a halt to construction of President Trump's massive White House ballroom, saying congressional approval would be needed for this project. Trump calls the ruling wrong. His administration files an appeal.
Oil prices climbed Wednesday with Brent at $104.63 and US crude at $102.34 as West Asia tensions kept supply risks high. Even with talks hinting at US-Iran deal, OPEC output is down 7.3 million barrels per day, and Brent posted a record 64% gain in March. We have some breaking news coming in. At least one terrorist has been killed in the ongoing anti-terror operation in Arhama area of Jammu and Kashmir's Ganderbal district.
Well, the operation, which began last night, is currently still underway. Sources in the security establishment indicated that the remaining terrorists are believed to be trapped within the operational area. Forces on the ground are working to secure all exit routes to prevent any possible escape.
And according to officials, the operation was launched by two Assam Rifles of Indian Army, Jammu and Kashmir Police and the Central Reserve Police Force following intelligence inputs of the presence of two foreign terrorists. This is the latest we're getting at this point. At least one terrorist has been killed in the ongoing anti-terror operation in the Arhama area of Jammu and Kashmir's Ganderbal district.
And the operation is still underway. It began last night. Sources in the security establishment have indicated that the remaining terrorists are believed to be trapped within this operational area. Forces on the ground are working to secure all exit routes to prevent any possible escape. And according to officials, the operation was launched by 2 Assam Rifles of Indian Army. These officers, Jammu and Kashmir Police and Central Reserve Police Force, following intelligence inputs on the presence of 2 foreign terrorists. And for more on this, we're now being joined by our senior special correspondent Idris Sloan, joining us over the phone line. Idris, give us more on what we've picked up so far. What kind of terrain in this? What are the security forces dealing with?
Well, Shivan, one terrorist body has been recovered so far from the operation site, along with arms and ammunition. Security forces believe that there are 1 or 2 more terrorists who are holed up at the operation site. What we see on the ground is more deployment being brought in from Jammu and Kashmir Police, Indian Army, as well as the Central Reserve Police Forces, making sure that all the exit points of this area are completely sealed and there is no escape route for the terrorists who are holed up at the operation site. On Tuesday afternoon, security forces had a tip-off about the presence of these terrorists in the area, after which there was a massive cordon and search operation which was on for hours till the time these terrorists were holed up at one of the positions, where they started firing towards security forces, resulting in an encounter. The encounter continued during the night as well, and with the first light in the morning, security forces saw one dead body of the terrorist lying very close to the operation site. That body has been recovered now by security forces. Meanwhile, the firing still continuing, as they believe that there could be 1 or 2 terrorists holed up at the operation site. Let me tell you that the security forces had the input that both the terrorists are foreign, they're Pakistani, and have been hiding in the forest area for quite some time.
Right. Thanks, Idris, for getting us all those details. Of course, we'll continue to closely track the development, but for now, that was our special correspondent, Idris Sloan, joining us on the phone line.
Continuing with updates from West Asia, as the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah escalates, the United Nations warned that southern Lebanon is on the verge of becoming the newest occupied territory in West Asia.
Well, Lebanon has denounced Israel's expansionist plans, even as Beirut continues to bear the brunt of the latest Israeli strikes, with casualties mounting. The Israeli military says it carried out 2 separate attacks in Beirut, targeting a senior Hezbollah commander and another member of the group. Now, according to Lebanon's health ministry, 5 people were killed and 21 wounded in the Janaa district, where 4 parked cars were destroyed in the strikes. Witnesses say that multiple missiles fired from an Israeli drone, they destroyed the vehicles, sending thick smoke into the sky. Ambulances and firefighters rushed to the scene, while another strike in Kaldeh, capital, which is south of the capital, killed 2 more people and injured 3 others.
Well, the escalation comes as Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, vowed to occupy a swathe of southern Lebanon after the war with Hezbollah, establishing a security zone up to the Litani River. Lebanon's defense minister, Major General Michael Menasseh, said Katz's remarks reflected a clear intention to impose a new occupation of Lebanese territory. He warned of mass displacement and destruction of villages and towns in the south.
On Tuesday, the UN Security Council met after 3 Indonesian peacekeepers with United Nations interim force were killed in 2 incidents in southern Lebanon. According to reports, the UN force investigating the deaths blamed Israeli fire for killing a peacekeeper on Sunday when a projectile exploded in a UNIFIL position near Archid al-Kaysar.
According to another source, the fire came from an Israeli tank, adding that debris from a tank round has been recovered at the site. In the other incident, UNIFIL claimed that a mine may have destroyed a peacekeeping vehicle in which 2 Indonesian troops were killed. Israel says that it is investigating this incident and denied responsibility.
And India's dependence on imported oil for over 85% of its needs makes the country extremely vulnerable to rising crude prices.
The US-Israel war with Iran, now in its fifth week, has pushed oil prices over 50% this month, and that has been the Achilles heel for Indian stocks and the rupee. The surge in crude to above $114 per barrel has raised concerns over inflation and macro stability. We decode the impact of the war on Iran with India in this next report. Take a look. Indian stocks wrapped up their bleakest month since the COVID sell-off in March 2020. The Sensex and Nifty crashed over 11% in March, capping off their worst fiscal year since 2020. Indian benchmarks also underperformed other Asian and emerging market stocks. Foreign investors sold a record $12 billion worth of domestic stocks, surpassing the previous record of about $10 billion in October 2024. Total outflows this year have exceeded $13 billion and nearing levels seen a year ago. Investors now say there is a lack of compelling narrative to draw global funds back, even if the conflict eases in the near term. The rupee crossed 95 against the dollar for the first time, marking a third consecutive day of historic lows. Even before the war, investors were grappling with a weak rupee. This week's moves are a reflection of the extreme fear among investors. After surging as much as 1.4% to 92.9 per dollar at the Monday open, from a low of 94.8 per dollar on Friday, the rupee gave up gains and hit a fresh low in the final stretches of trading. The currency crashed to a new record low of 95.6 rupees to the dollar before closing out the session just above 95 per dollar. The wild gyrations come despite measures announced by the Reserve Bank of India. India's central bank announced a daily currency position limit of $100 million for domestic banks. That move was aimed at reining in speculators betting on a further fall in the rupee. However, the historic energy shock has worsened the pressure on the currency, and the impact of RBI's measures was only short-lived as war fears triggered panic selling. The rupee's reversal shows that the currency weakness is deeply structural due to elevated oil prices. Crude importers rushing to buy dollars also hurt the rupee. Bets are that the trade deficit will widen further for the import-dependent country. India's heavy reliance on oil imports is straining the country's current account deficit as the Iran war drags on. The current account deficit is expected to widen, with estimates suggesting that it may reach 2.5% of GDP from the current concerns over surging energy costs, which are overshadowing the nation's long-term growth story. Analysts warn of ongoing caution due to potential inflationary pressures, which could affect India's growth and earnings. MK Research had predicted that if Brent rises to $100 a barrel, the country's growth rate would fall to 6% from the above 7% pre-war baseline bets. The Iran war has now pushed Brent prices to about $114. That suggests a large shock for the country. If Brent rises to $130 per barrel, MK Research forecasts current account deficit to widen to 3.7% of GDP from 1.3% before the war. The balance of payment shortfall is expected to widen to $138 billion from $15 billion. Inflation is predicted to surge to above 5% from about 4%, and growth rate is expected to fall to a low of 5.4%. The country is also likely to face a capital account deficit as foreign investors flee from Indian markets. Some analysts say it could be the worst since the balance of payment crisis in the early 1990s. Soumya Kanti Ghosh, Group Chief Economic Advisor of State Bank of India and a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, said this has never happened since 1991. Crude price pressures has prompted Goldman Sachs to cut India's 2026 growth forecast to 5.9% just last week. And that comes less than 2 weeks after the group lowered growth to 6.5% from 7% previously. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
In other news, UK's competition regulator has said that it will re-examine Microsoft's software licensing practices in the cloud market.
But the move comes months after the regulator previously decided not to take action on its earlier findings. Last year, an inquiry by UK's Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, found that the dominance of Microsoft and Amazon in cloud computing was harming competition. Microsoft was specifically highlighted. It has specifically highlighted for its licensing practices, which the authority said restrict competition. And this refers to the company charging licensing fees on enterprise software, such as Windows servers and Microsoft 365, when their services are run on rival cloud platforms.
In other words, customers using Microsoft software on non-Microsoft clouds could face higher costs, making it more difficult for competing cloud providers to attract business customers. The CMA said that both Microsoft and Amazon had taken steps to reduce some fee in the cloud market following its previous investigation.
Well, the two companies together hold around 30 to 40% of the market in cloud services, including processing, storage, and networking. Google is the third largest provider with a market share of 5 to 10%.
The regulator said that its new investigation into Microsoft business software ecosystem, it would allow it to grant the company strategic market status. The status would enable the CMA to intervene in software licensing to ensure fair competition. CMA Chief Executive Sarah Cardell said that the regulator was acting in a flexible, pragmatic way to deliver real impact as quickly as possible for UK customers. Microsoft stated that the changes address the CMA's commitment to ensuring UK customers can move, deploy and operate their workloads across cloud with confidence, flexibility and reduced friction.
Well, humanity is preparing to return to deep space more than 5 decades after the last footsteps on the lunar soil. NASA is ready again.
And this time it begins not with landing, but with a daring journey around the moon. Our next story brings you the details of this 10-day flyby around the moon. Take a look.
For years, the moon has remained close, yet untouched by human presence. Silent, distant, watching. Now the wait is about to end, not with a landing, but with a test of endurance, precision and ambition. NASA is set to launch Artemis II, the first human mission to travel towards the moon since Apollo 17. A historic return, but with a different goal. NASA began its countdown for launch to moon in more than half a century on Wednesday, April 1st.
Get the opportunity to send our crew farther than anyone's gone before, and it's an incredible moment for the Artemis generation, and we're excited and we are ready to press. I got the opportunity to talk with Reed earlier today, and when the teams are ready and when the spacecraft is ready, the crew is ready and excited to go.
The 10-day mission begins on April 1st. Liftoff, the most critical moment. The spacecraft rises, breaking free from Earth's grip. Hours later, it settles into Earth's orbit. April 1st to April 2nd is about checks, systems, stability. Every detail scrutinized before the journey outward begins. Then comes the push. The spacecraft fires its engines to leave Earth's orbit. By April 6th, the crew reaches the moon. Then the crew swing around the far side and heads back to Earth. The 4 astronauts set to carry out the moon voyage are Americans Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, and Christina Koch, along with Canadian colleague Jeremy Hansen.
So what I'm really excited about is to hear what their perspective is once they're on the opposite side, looking at the lunar surface large and the Earth as small. So I think that would be really interesting to hear their words.
The Odyssey will mark a series of firsts. The first time a woman, a person of color, and a non-American will venture on a moon mission. But getting it off the ground has not been simple. The Artemis II mission was originally due to take off as early as February, but repeated setbacks stalled that goal and even necessitated rolling the rocket back to its hangar for analysis and repairs. And then there is the weather. For now, the countdown is on. The fingers crossed. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And now shifting our focus to the world of sports, the 2026 FIFA World Cup is just over 70 days away. But Iran's participation was in serious doubt due to the ongoing war in West Asia.
Well, that fear has now been allayed by FIFA President Infantino. He has said that Iran will participate just as scheduled. I quote him here, Iran will be at the World Cup, and that's why we're here. We're delighted because they're a very, very strong team. I'm very happy. I've seen the team, I've spoken to the players and the coach, so everything is fine. Iran's matches will be played where they are supposed to be according to the draw.
Now, Infantino made these remarks in Turkey, where he attended Iran's friendly match against Costa Rica, which Iran won 5-0. Shortly after Infantino's statement, the Iranian Football Federation all but confirmed their participation. Listen to this.
For us, FIFA's rules and regulations take precedence. We follow what FIFA says. That's only natural. And it's not just us. All 48 teams taking part in the World Cup will follow FIFA's guidelines. Each host nation has made commitments to FIFA and is obliged to honor those commitments.
Well, this was Iran's second match in Turkey. Last week, ahead of their friendly against Nigeria, Iranian players wore black armbands and held school bags during the national anthem to honor victims of a strike on a primary school in Iran.
The ongoing war in West Asia had cast doubts over Iran's participation in the World Cup. Trump directly said that Iran's team should not travel to the tournament for their own life and safety. The Iranian Football Federation, who strongly opposed Trump's statement earlier this month, the federation said that it was in talks with FIFA to relocate its matches from the US to Mexico.
The 2026 FIFA World Cup is being co-hosted by the United States, Mexico and Canada. Starts on the 11th of June, and Iran are set to play their first Group G game against New Zealand in Los Angeles on the 15th of June. They are then scheduled to play Belgium in Los Angeles on the 21st of June and Egypt in Seattle on the 27th of the same month. Well, actor Samara Weaving turned heads at the Los Angeles premiere of Over Your Dead Body, proudly showing off her baby bump.
Well, Weaving says that the time of her pregnancy feels just right. She opened up about how women in Hollywood often worry about being sidelined during this phase. But for her, things have been different. She stars alongside Jason Segel in the dark comedy thriller, which follows a couple who cannot stand each other and take things to a deadly level. Over Your Dead Body is a remake of the Norwegian film The Trip.
Pretty wild. I mean, I think the timing of it is kind of perfect because I think as a woman in Hollywood, when you get pregnant, you get a bit scared that you're never going to be hired and people forget about you and put you in a cupboard. But having these 3 films come out that I've been able to promote has just been so much fun. And I get lots of good free pregnancy pics.
Well, Jason Segel, known for Forgetting Sarah Marshall, How I Met Your Mother and Shrinking, says stepping into a darker, more intense role was a refreshing change helmed by Hormat Kohn. The film also features Timothy Olyphant and Juliette Lewis. Over Your Dead Body is set to hit theatres on April 24th in the US.
We have some breaking news coming in. Kuwait has said that Iranian drones have targeted fuel tanks at Kuwait airport. According to the state news agency, the drone attack has sparked a massive fire at the airport.
There are, however, no reports of casualties, not yet. Iran has fired missiles and drones at Israel and US allies in the Gulf since the start of the war, which began on the 28th of February. Elsewhere in the Gulf on Wednesday, Bahrain's Interior Ministry said a fire broke out at a business facility as a result of Iranian aggression, quote unquote. That's the big development we're tracking for you at this hour. News just come in. Kuwait says that Iranian drones have targeted fuel tanks at Kuwait airport. This is as per Kuwait's state news agency.
And the drone attack has sparked a massive fire at the airport. There are, however, no reports of any casualties as of yet. Iran has fired multiple missiles and drones at Israel and US allies in the Gulf since the start of the war, which began on February 28th. Now, elsewhere in the Gulf on Wednesday, Bahrain's Interior Ministry said a fire broke out at a business facility as a result of the Iranian aggression.
All right, viewers, that's a wrap on this edition of World DNA. Stay with us, slipping into a very short break. This is WION. Come right back.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power. Only on WION. World is One.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness. In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION. World is One.
Vielleicht nur als Imposant.
Well, thanks for staying with us. You are watching WION World as One, and this is Speed News. Let's start with all the top stories making headlines today. US President Donald Trump said US forces will end operations in Iran very soon, evoking a timeline of 2 to 3 weeks as his administration pursues talks with Iranian authorities. Asked during a White House event about the impact of high fuel prices since the start of the war on February 8th, well, Trump said, and I'm quoting him here, "All I have to do is leave Iran and we'll be doing that very soon, and they'll become tumbling down." White House has announced that Trump will deliver an address on Iran Wednesday night. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt wrote on Tuesday evening on the platform X that President Donald Trump will provide an important update on Iran in his national address. Rubio has said that the end to Iran war is near. While speaking exclusively to Fox News, the US Secretary of State has said, and I'm quoting him here, "End to Iran war is not today, it's not tomorrow, but it is coming." Rubio reasoned that there's nothing any country is doing to help Iran that is anyway impeding US mission. Also, he said that there is potential for direct talks with Iran at some point. He also added that US will have to re-examine relationship with NATO after the war ends. US Central Command releases video of what it said showed a precision munitions strike on underground military targets deep inside Iran. The video was posted by the CENTCOM on X. Authorities in Kuwait said that the country's international airport has been subjected to brazen attacks by drones from Iran and the armed faction it supports. The raids reportedly targeted fuel tanks at the airport, leading to a large fire breaking out at the site. A British maritime security agency has said that a tanker has been hit by a projectile in the Gulf off the coast of Qatar's capital Doha. Well, some damage has been reported, but no casualties. The UK Maritime Trade Operation said it had received a report of an incident 31 kilometers north of Doha that a tanker has been hit by unknown projectile on the port side, causing damage to the hull above waterline. It added there were no environmental impact and that the authorities were investigating the incident. Israeli Prime Minister said that Israel is forging new alliances with quote-unquote important countries in the region to counter what he described as the Iranian threat. Speaking in a video address, Netanyahu did not specify which countries were involved or gave further details on the same. The United States has confirmed the kidnapping of an American journalist in Baghdad by a suspected Iranian-backed Iraqi armed group. Well, the State Department said it had warned the journalist of security risks and was working to ensure the Americans' release as soon as possible. The Assistant Secretary of State for Global Public Affairs said on X that an individual with ties to the Iranian-aligned militia group Kataib Hezbollah, believed to be involved in the kidnapping, has been taken into custody by Iraqi authorities. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have threatened to target major US technology and industrial companies from 1st of April in what they describe as retaliation for attacks on Iranian territory. The statement named 18 countries, which includes Microsoft, Google, Apple, Intel, IBM, Tesla and Boeing, warning that their operations in regional could be hit. Well, the IRGC said in a statement that these companies should expect the destruction of their respective units in exchange for each terror attack in Tehran, starting from 8 p.m. local time on Wednesday, 1st of April. The Israeli military says it carried out 2 separate attacks in Beirut targeting a senior Hezbollah commander and another member of the group. Well, according to Lebanon's health ministry, 5 people have been killed and 21 wounded in the Jinnah district, where 4 parked cars were destroyed in the strikes. Well, witnesses say multiple missiles fired from an Israeli drone destroyed the vehicle, sending thick smoke into the sky. Ambulances and firefighters rushed to the scene, while another strike in Kaldale, south of the capital, killed 2 more people and injured 3 others. The UN peacekeeping chief said a roadside explosion appears to have struck the convoy of 2 Indonesian peacekeepers killed in southern Lebanon. The UN peacekeeping chief cited initial findings of an investigation into the killing of Lebanon peacekeepers. Well, the 2 peacekeepers with the UNIFIL or UNIFIL force were killed on Monday near Bani Hayan in South Lebanon, and 2 other soldiers were wounded. Another Indonesian soldier was killed overnight Sunday into Monday when a projectile exploded near one of the group's positions. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara said that his country will stay out of the US-Israeli war against Iran. Speaking at an event in London, the Syrian president said the country will not get involved in the war unless Syria is subject to aggression and has no diplomatic solutions. Pope Leo urged President Donald Trump to look for an off-ramp to end the war in Iran. Well, this marks an unusual direct appeal from the pontiff to the president to end the expanding regional conflict. The Pope told journalists outside his residence near Rome that he is hopeful that Trump is looking for a way to decrease the amount of violence. Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed serious concerns about the ongoing war with his Emirati counterpart Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan during their phone conversation on Tuesday. The Kremlin readout of the call said they emphasized the importance of a swift cessation of hostilities and intensification of political and diplomatic efforts towards a peaceful resolution on the conflict. Israeli police dispersed protesters who gathered outside the Knesset in Jerusalem against the anti-death penalty law. The bill passed by